I'm Stephanie Kahn. Welcome to Friend of a Friend. I have a lot of creative friends who make music, they make art, they make beautiful lives, as I like to say. And so I started this podcast so I could introduce them to some of you too. Sometimes we'll hear about how and why they make what they do. Sometimes we will hear a little sample of their music. Today it's all of that because my guest is John Kameel Farah. That's music by John Farah with live electronics and piano, recorded in a concert from home in 2020 for Act for Music. And John's my guest today on the podcast. John is a pianist, a composer, and a visual artist, not necessarily in that order, and he's probably more than that. Well, hey, I'll tell you what else he is. He's a warm, enthusiastic guy and extremely talented. He's a Canadian with Palestinian heritage. And he's based in Berlin, where he manages to earn a living as a pianist and a composer. And I think that's no mean feat anywhere, really. He does make regular trips home to Toronto, though, where you might be lucky enough to catch one of his solo shows. And if you do go, you'll never know exactly what you're going to hear. There's a lot of improvisation, but a lot of structure, too. He incorporates elements of Middle Eastern music, contemporary classical. He adds electronics to baroque and early music. We first met about 20 or so years ago, but we only see each other every few years at best. However, we just had a long evening of eating and talking together last week, so we're all warmed up and ready to chat again. Even though he's in Toronto right now, we had this conversation via Zoom. John, welcome to Friend of a Friend.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to see you again after the night of eating and talking, mostly eating.
And then before that, the long gap of time.
But I'm just going off the top of my head. Sorry, can I just
that's okay.
Throw in, because it's funny because I heard the introduction that you gave, and I was already wishing that I could have jumped in there. And I was like, you know what, Stephanie?
No, go for it.
Can we just back up? No. I want to let you guide the interview. Let's end this whole thing.
I was trying to remember, I think we were trying to remember when we met, and I think it was at some kind of Canadian Electronic Ensemble event, CEE. Like it was either a concert or one of those barbecues.
Yes, it was some electronic festival in a park, I believe.
Oh, yeah, maybe, yeah.
And the East End or something of Toronto, yeah.
Which is a crazy venue for an electronic event.
You're right, it was a kind of a barbecue. And I thought it was strange myself, but then I just figured... that's the kind of thing I would love to do, is go to a park and hear weird, formless electronic music that's not like beat-driven stuff, but just some weird sound sculpture stuff. And then like eat a hot dog, have some fries, and sit on the grass would be amazing.
So do you think of yourself as a pianist primarily, or a composer primarily, and the piano is your vehicle, or an artist and these are just some manifestations, or is it too hard to even...
Yeah, I totally know the question. Making my business card, I used to always and ah for ages about whether to put composer-pianist or pianist-composer and which one. So I'd say okay, so the most important thing to me throughout my whole life is just being creative. If I were to keep on getting more and more basic, so playing the piano, no, but it's the creative aspect of playing the piano. So it's being a composer. But then even being a composer is specifically composing music. It's more like the urge to be creative. So I'd rather, if I really had my druthers, I've never used that expression before. That sounds really pretentious, but and I would just write creative artist or something, but that's just vague. No one has any idea what you're doing. But it did remind me, while you were saying those very nice things about me at the beginning, I was thinking who are my favorite artists? I just mean creative individuals. Two people that immediately come to mind, I was thinking of John Oswald and Michael Snow. These two people that, what are they? They are photographers and sculptors and musicians and improvisers and composers and people who make weird sounds and people who just come up with whatever weird concept. They're just always creating. And which direction that they go, it's not contained by anything. But that doesn't mean that any individual thing that they did, I might just look, okay, that's some weird print that they did. That's not the reason that I love them. It's like their being is the piece of art, rather than, or the way that they exist is the piece of art. And even though my music and my artwork has nothing to do with theirs, it's not similar, I'm not trying to emulate them at all, but I just have them in my mind as these reminders of the freedom to create. Even though I think, like, if I were to put myself like beside them, I think I'm like extremely conservative compared to them. The drawings are still with traditional mediums like paper and ink and dots and line drawings and I'm composing using notes.
You're not like doing Aeolian harp or something, or found object sound or something.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. I just meant it's less overtly experimental in a way, although I think that the experimentalism exists on a different plane, kind of.
It actually reminds me of something you said in another interview, which was what interests you is the push and pull between things that are structured and things that are very free. And I wonder, could you talk a little more about that? I think it's related to what you just said.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, when I do my concerts now, the concert itself is the work of art from beginning to end. It's the way everything is intertwined as to be perceived as a large, giant canvas that's winding all over the place. And there are parts that are more intricately, meticulously composed, where every single note matters. And other parts which I like to have as like tension and release, where there would be formless blobs of sound design or building up loops and then improvising over them. So it's like formlessness going into structure, and that's one like axis of like push and pull. Another one you could like say would be the push and pull between tonality and atonality, or it could break into improvisation that's sort of inspired by Arabic modes, then go into just a purely electronic thing. Then it could be a piece by Bach, which has electronics woven into it, but they all kind of flow in and out of each other. And there's a kind of, I think, a weird balance by the end. There's something hidden in that message as well that I'm kind of trying to say. It's like a lifelong thesis that I have, that if you go back centuries, the Middle East or North Africa, Middle East, however you want to describe it, and Europe, that was all part of, like, the Mediterranean was the playground of interacting of different cultures. There wasn't this as much of an us and them, this like bifurcation of civilizations and everything like that. They were interacting, and I'm coming from a place where those are things sprouting from the same trunk of the same tree. So for me, let's say playing William Byrd also has an element of, because it's so heavily ornamented, like every other note in Byrd sometimes, and that's the vehicle of expression. And that's like the same in Middle Eastern music, where ornaments are not really just ornaments. They're the material.
Well, even a note, you don't just hit a note. Sometimes you have to get to the note or something. So it's not as stepwise.
Like the ornament, let's say if we think of an ornament like leaves adorning a column, the column is the actual material. The leaves are kind of inconsequential. They're just stuff to make it nicer. Whereas in Arabic music, the trill is the material. You don't have the ornaments, then you're just losing the heart of the music. Yeah. It's like a lifelong study of ornaments and ornamentation.
That's interesting, because I said when I played a clip of your music on a previous show when I was surveying Bandcamp, I said that you have these drawings that can be delicate or pointillistic or woven together. And to me, there's a similarity between your drawings and your music. Not all the time, but very often. And I wondered what connection there is for you between these two expressions, really.
I actually feel more free making visual art than I do music. I felt that way for a while. I think that's like a professional thing because I'm more in the public sphere as a musician. So therefore, it's a reality that's there
Sure.
subconscious, whether you like it or not. Even if no one's saying anything directly to you, you've got that conversation within yourself of what's expected of you, what have you done, how does this compare to what you did before, what you released publicly, what you've done, blah, blah, blah. Is it going to live up to this or that? All those questions, right, that are going on that kind of like cloud your artistic freedom sometimes
Makes sense.
yourself.
Yeah.
And I feel like with making visual art, it's just me and the pen and the paper, and that's it. I don't really care if anyone likes it or not. I mean, it's nice, but it's much more direct. It's just for me the satisfaction of having done it and doing it. And I feel free and no pressure to other people aren't really in my mind. But that being said, there is a tandem between the two. I think also they fill in the gaps. So when I'm not making music, well, usually my drawings are smaller scale these days. And also they're like little studies. If I'm not afraid to fail in them, if one doesn't work out, or I don't even really look at it that way. It's just what it is, and then go on to the next one or study a certain idea. Right. I mean, so the last 6 months I've just been doing olive branches. That's all I've been doing. And I was, okay, so one can just explore something just forever. Just there's infinite interpretations of it.
If you just close your eyes and listen to your music, if you're listening to a recording, or even if you're at a concert and you're just listening, I really get caught up in lyricism, in the journey of the music. But then when I watch you play, I find your piano technique very impressive.
Oh, that's nice.
Like, it's really hard stuff that you've given yourself to play at times. And it's not flashy. I don't mean that. It's but anyway, but
sorry, can I interject there?
yeah.
It makes me happy to hear that. But of course, it's a source of insecurity for myself. Of course, I always wish that my technique was better. No, I can say that, like, not feeling guilty, because I heard Keith Jarrett say it once something, and I was like, oh my God, if Keith Jarrett's insecure, I don't feel bad about that. But
do you like practicing? Do you practice a lot?
Yeah.
Because what I was going to say first, though, and it's feeding into what you're saying. I read a quote. It says, technique must be mastered so that the body won't stand in the way of the soul's expression. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it totally does. Yeah, I wish I could be in that space all the time. But there's one thing that I can say to that, which is that, you know how people talk about, let's say, Glenn Gould, Oscar Peterson, Keith Jarrett, they're like infamous Hummer singer people. They sing in a really kind of noticeable way while they're playing. And I don't think that that's just like being eccentric, because they're hearing what they're going to play in their head first. It's originating in their head. Like, they're hearing the sound first inside their body, then it comes out through their fingers. So I've noticed that if I'm like, I hate to use the word like in the zone, but or whatever it is, or if I'm not in it, then my fingers are just moving. My fingers are doing something, but it's sort of just my fingers moving around. Whereas if I lose myself in the music in a good way, then it means that the ideas are originating, like I'm hearing the melody or the sounds or the harmonies inside me, and then they're being delivered to my fingers. The singing is usually ahead of the playing. You're not singing behind what you're playing. You're singing ahead, and that's guiding your fingers. Your fingers follow what you're singing. So that, for me, it means that you've lost yourself in a good way, and that's like real music being made. So those are the best moments for me.
Before we continue, I want to hear a little bit of your music. Here's something where you sound like you are in flow to me, and it's from your Macam constellation. Okay, so categorizing music was think it used to be in record stores. Remember, Sam, they recommend there was actually the plastic stood up and it said R&B, and that's where you found it. And then there were some people you like didn't know where to find them because they fell in the cracks between these different things. So now we don't have to as much because you can tag it with everything you want. And I heard you once come up with a really great name for your, like you made up a genre. So when pressed, what do you call your music? If a presenter says, what kind of music do you play?
Yeah, no, okay, so it came from whenever you're trying to like, let's say to solicit a gig at a festival or just introduce your music to someone, you'd always start off, my music is hard to describe. It's inspired by baroque, blah, 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 Arabic. And it would just end up being this gigantic paragraph and to expect someone to read all of that. Whereas a lot of other artists, it was just very clear. You could, in one sentence, you could just describe what it was and immediately kind of be on there. And then just by fluke, what it was, I call it Baroque Arabic cyberpunk or Baroque Middle Eastern cyberpunk. Those three terms slung together kind of wrap it all together in a way that the brain could digest it.
No, it's a great name, though. I mean, a great genre.
Then I wouldn't even have to say I'm a pianist. It's like adding little Lego pieces onto it eventually.
Yeah. It becomes almost a German word then.
I was just thinking of that. Or a burger that's too big that you can't fit in your mouth.
I know.
You'd only eat that burger in private. You wouldn't eat it in public.
Right, because you would be, well, or you have to wear a bib. Even if not, it's all down your face. I object. I deconstruct the burgers, or I don't deconstruct them. I take them apart. I take out sometimes.
I cut them in half.
Oh, yeah, that's not bad. Yeah. But I digress. So,
sorry, I wish people found that interesting because I would love to just talk about that all day.
We could talk about that.
I could listen to a person talking about that. Anyway, sorry.
I've gone completely off track here. We were mentioning in the passing that you incorporate elements of Palestinian music, melodies. Some are traditional, some are more classical, like Maqam constellation. That would be very overtly, but using the Maqam mode system. And it's possibly too big a question. But what do you think is the role of artists in a time like this? You're Canadian, but you have these roots and you're very interested in the culture, visually, musically, and it's become sometimes a problem to share your ideas about it, or what do you think?
Well, what we're talking about here, this is like so important, and I would actually defer to what's with these expressions of me. I would defer. Anyway, so it was a conversation I had with my dad a few months ago, where now I've spent like most of my life going against what my dad said, and sort of like post-teenage thing that never completely died out and stuff. So then for me to really hearken to something that my dad says, sometimes in the most crucial moments. And so it was something that really made an impression when we were talking about, I told him about people are getting silenced now. People are getting canceled. People are losing their jobs. People are having exhibitions and concerts canceled.
You've had that happen, right?
Well, it just happened this morning, unbelievably. Concert canceled before this interview, and it's really unsettling. And over something that just basically simply playing Palestinian folk tunes. I plan to do that, or talk about Palestinian identity. Not to talk about anyone else, not to put anyone else down, not to do anything. Just simply talk about myself or my own experience, to help humanize people, not to dehumanize others. Anyway, what I was basically coming to him, what do I do? I'm at a loss what to do here. The easy way out is just continue playing concerts and saying nothing. Then I can't look at myself in the mirror, right? Yeah. Maybe I'll get more concerts, but I won't be able to look at myself in the mirror or speak completely on my mind and face being blacklisted. But the ultimate question was how to continue going on making art, even if that wasn't a factor, even if you weren't afraid of being canceled or it wasn't a danger. No, what I mean is, let's say what's happening in Gaza is just so cataclysmic that it can break someone's soul. It can break someone's spirit. I think that what's happening is it's being done on purpose to break people's spirits, not just even the people that are there, the people that are watching the people that are there, the people that care about it. And so, of course, we all struggle with that on a daily basis. And I talked to him about that. I was like, what's the point of being an artist, or how can I go on making art, meaning music and everything like that? And he said, no. This is amazing, because after all the years of like fighting with him over like being a musician, or, you know, get a real job type, never said that, you know, the basic parental conversation with their children when they want to become musicians and all that stuff. So all of that aside, this true like kind of deep voice comes out from him. No, it's in times like these that we need artists more than ever. In the time, the worst, most trying, darkest times, that we look to the poets and the musicians and the artists to feed our spirits and to give us a reason to go on. And so that was a gift.
Mm-hmm.
I have to remind myself of that, because it's not like, you know, you hear that once and then you're good to go. Then you're set for the rest. It's like every day is a new challenge, but that's something at least I can try to remind myself of.
Has it had an effect on the kind of thing you told me already, or you told us that you're drawing a lot of olive branches. Has it had an effect musically on you, like on what the kind of thing you're composing or playing?
Yes. How I frame my concerts, how I interact with the audience. One thing I really wanted to say is, of course, Middle Eastern Arabic music is a big part of my music and of my voice and of my style, whatever you want to call it. But like, I mean, I grew up playing Bach, classical composers. I'm a Western trained musician. When it comes to education and, you know, everything like that from the ground up, the Arabic music side came from simply just hearing it. That's like just more something I've internalized. So I'm always really gratified if I hear like another Arabic musician or an Iranian musician and they hear my music and they're like, oh no, but the way that your melodies move are very convincing and it sounds, you know, you're born there. And I was born in Brampton, you know. So what I'm saying, but I grew up with Kulthum, Fairuz, whatever, Farid al-Atrash, all these like Arabic musician giants playing around the house or listening to that in the car. I internalized the way that the melodies move, the way they're contoured and everything like that. So that's how it comes out of me. But of course, even on the piano, on keyboard instruments, unless you're playing some like rarefied synthesizer or some like software synthesizer that you've rewired it so that it can play all the quarter tones and microtone scales, you can't really access authentic Arabic scales, or at least not many of them, other than playing like the really generic ones like Hijaz, which is your harmonic minor, basic Middle Eastern mode that everybody defaults to, you know, stuff like that. So my whole thing is, I'm not playing straight up, that you're not hearing an authentic oud player representing the style like it's been preserved over the centuries. You're getting this deconstructed and reassembled and thing that's been churned and spit out through a sci-fi novel or an episode of Star Trek of some other societies or whatever. And just that's being fed with all my life of playing Messiaen and Stockhausen and Schoenberg and free jazz, drum and bass, breakcore, blah, blah, blah. All those things get chewed up and spat out through, like reassembled in my imagination and then put out there for the audience to like take in whatever way they want.
It seems very Canadian to me, though, for that to be the way, like that. It's, you know, here we are in the diaspora doing our version of something that's not trying to copy the old exactly. It's a continuation in a new way.
It probably is. I'm also still like recreating an imaginary past. I don't want to get all like a hoity-toity about this. Like, it's just
I like that.
Because I wasn't born there, so I have to reassemble something that is evocative of that, that's a recognizable signpost, no matter how out there it is. I'm not happy to admit that. That's a kind of an embarrassing thing to admit because it puts me as an outsider. But I mean, it's the truth. So
that's actually even more convincing in a way, as you say. If it's not actually reproducing the folk or the traditional form and everything, but it actually is evoking it. You know, you've connected with it on a deeper level from a long time ago, from your childhood. I'm trying to come back to what your dad said again about now we need the artists more than ever.
I would think maybe it's just not supposed to be easy. If you're speaking out against injustice, well, injustices happen because of institutions and organizations and governments and societal inequalities. And so it's to be expected. What the answer is for it, I don't know. I look to other people for their wisdom on that. It's a daily thing for me to try to figure out how to go forward. I can only just do a small piece, contribute my own voice, and that'll be like my own unique angle that I'll have.
Right.
And everybody's working for the betterment of the situation, is doing it in their own way. And I just try to do it in my own way, so that something that they wouldn't have necessarily gotten from going to a demonstration or attending a conference or reading like a historical book or something, they'll get my own unique take on it. Then I try to feel that I've done my job.
Well, I hope you won't be discouraged, Donna. You're going to keep going, and you've got a concert coming up in Toronto.
Oh, yeah. Oh, great. Yeah, I have a concert on Tuesday, May 7th at the Redwood Theatre. It's on Gerrard in the East End of Toronto. Yeah,
Perfect. Yeah, I hope I can make it back for that. So thank you so much for being on the show and reflecting and sharing your thoughts about music and culture and everything.
Thank you. Again, I really appreciate the conversation.
Thanks so much, John. Hope to see you again for more chatter and food.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, bye for now.
Okay, bye.
That was my conversation with John Farah. You can find information about where to find his music, where to hear him play live, see a couple of his drawings in the show notes, or you can go straight to his website, johnfarah.com. That's John with an H and Farah.com. Thanks, as always, to Ali Burcock for his theme, which I keep on using until someone tells me not to use it. Thanks to Marcus for cooking and generally being patient about the podcast. And as always, thank you to you for listening. You can subscribe. You can subscribe within the app, without the app. You can listen on Spotify, on iTunes, anywhere you get your podcasts. There's some handy buttons on the episode page that will take you wherever you want to go. Well, not anywhere, but one of those places. I'm Stephanie Kahn, and I'd like to go out with more music by John Farah from his album Time Sketches. This is the opening of Fantasia Prelude. Bye for now.